So anybody has a question, you can ask it before there are still 1 more minute, 2 minutes to go. Last time I did deliver the same lecture on the balance, which has only 25 slides. The one which we are going to give today has 105 slides, which means 80 more slides are added to the same slide PPT, which was delivered 2 years ago. So don't be under the impression that we will watch it previously, whatever is written over there. 80 more slides, which means there is a much more explanation, much more content on the same subject. So don't be under the impression that the same thing I'm repeating. I'm not repeating the same thing. I am adding to it. It took me 4 hours yesterday to update this. So it is not just the same thing which is going to be repeated, what was done 2 years back. So this lecture itself will be of 1 hour at least. Last time it was 30 minutes probably, or maybe less. So we can start now. And if anybody has a question of yesterday's discussion, you can quickly ask. Otherwise, we'll move forward. So 10:30. Here we go. So as I said just now, this is not going to be the same what was last time. So it will be different. So one of the most important element in a photograph, everything is important, but as I said, this is a very common element called balance. So balancing you have seen very often in the life, how a cyclist, which is an unstable vehicle, gets balanced while driving it. Similarly, I also mentioned yesterday how a tightrope walker balances the walk on a rope with the use of a small, we call it as a bamboo. So in a photograph, there are mechanisms by which you can balance your photograph, and you have to learn it. It is a very abstract kind of a concept, not a technical, like shutter speed, aperture, film speed, exposure, they all are technical, but this is the aesthetic part which all of you need to develop someday or other. So we'll quickly start with that. So as I said, what exactly in examination you are supposed to write? What you understand is not important. What you make examiner understand is more important. And that is what the game is all about. That's why everything has to be written down over there, whatever is your understanding. So first is the question which can be framed in FTI entrance exam is, what is balance and what are the factors on which it depends? Explain in, say for example, 200 words or 500 words. It could be a small, it could be big, but you can't draw a painting over there or photograph over here, whichever I have explained. So the words are more important than the image in terms of writing, because there you are not going to draw anything, but at the same time, all of you are going to mention things. So writing part you need to understand very, very clearly. So balance is a way of composing an image so that all elements complement each other equally. Visual tension or harmony are created, which results in a pleasing image. Many different elements can be involved with incorporating balance into your image composition. So we will talk about all these things slowly. Just one quick table I found somewhere on the net, so I thought I'll just include that. So it quickly says balance types are tonal balance, then there's a color balance, then there's a size balance, then there's a texture balance and space balance. So we will talk about them also. At the same time, we will talk about a couple of more things which are not given in this quick reference kind of a thing. So it says tonal balance means if it is a dark, then visually heavy, and if it is a light, then visually light. Color balance, bold, bright color are visually heavy, and subtle and neutral colors are visually light. So you will not find a room in your house which is having a red color kind of wall. or for that matter, or any other color which could be too bright, or fluorescent green, or fluorescent yellow, because they are too bright a color which disturb the day-to-day life. Then it says size balance, which means object could be of bigger size, object could be of smaller size. Bigger size means visually heavy, and small size means obviously visually light. Texture balance, highly textured something, say for example, texture of a tree. If you look at the texture of a tree, it is a very visually heavy. Then visually light could be a smooth texture. Say for example, if you look at the texture of a thermocol. Thermocol also has a texture, but it is a smooth texture. So texture of a thermocol and texture of tree. These are the two quick examples you can think of. You go to a paper shop, you will find variety of papers, and papers also has a variety of texture also. So this textured paper are very, very important. And similarly, if you go to any colorful this narrow leg pant and all that, they have this wallpaper which also has a variety of texture. Maybe one color can have a 10 different kind of a texture. In Photoshop, those who are familiar with the Photoshop, there are 20-30 kind of texture which you can use for a image whenever you feel like. So these are the quick space balance. Space balance, we'll talk about negative space, etc. So we have mentioned earlier the leading lines yesterday, which actually leads to a most important part of a photograph. So how that is being created so that the eyes are directed toward the main subject. You should not be able to figure it out which is the main subject and which is not in a photograph. You should be quickly able to figure it out. This is the photograph all about. And rest of the thing are just balancing it. We'll show you a couple of photographs today. So eye direction and subject movement into space. Eye direction will give you visually strong if the eyes are, there's a photograph called gaze. I have collected the one photograph from the net, which gives a very strong direction that where you are supposed to look at it. Though you look into his eyes, but it gives about the where he is looking at, or what is most important to look at, which is missing from the image. But from the eyes direction pointing towards something, you can easily figure it out. So first is, we call it as a symmetrical balance. What exactly is symmetrical balance? There is a separate PPT on that also. I would be discussing that separately, but here quick glance, we'll go through it. So there are two kinds of symmetry. Either we call it as a horizontal symmetry, or we call it as a vertical symmetry. Something which is a vertical symmetrical, or something could be a horizontally symmetrical. Say for example, if you cut Qutub Minar from the center, if you cut down the Qutub Minar from the center, you will find half this side, half that side would be the same. So it is a vertical symmetry. But in day-to-day life, many things you will find horizontal symmetry, particularly for, as I mentioned yesterday, for the cinematography, we don't have a vertical frame. We always have a horizontal frame. 1:3:3, 1:6:6, 1:8:5, and 1:2.3, which is a cinemascope. So also known as a formal balance. A symmetrical balance means also a formal balance. This is the simplest and most obvious way to compose your photo. Simply arrange the elements of your picture so that symmetrically about the center. To achieve symmetrical balance, you need to frame the shots so that identical and similar objects are repeated symmetrically on each side of a given point. Horizontal symmetry seeks balance on the opposite dimension as vertical symmetry. Reflections are one of the most obvious use of horizontal symmetry. The horizontal mirror image just begs to be balanced in terms of perfectly straight horizontal line and enough space in the frame to show the reflection properly. So these are some of the images which I have collected. I'll just talk. It is most common to see photo arranged with a horizontal symmetry, but vertical symmetry is also produces a strong composition. The most common use of a symmetrical balance of photography in a horizontal split, primarily because of how common it is to encounter such sensor in nature. However, diagonal and vertical symmetry results in images that are just visually powerful. So I'll just show you some of the images. Now look at this guy. Maybe if you cut from the center, left and right both would look same. They look like a mirror image of each other. Now this is a vertical symmetry example. Now look at this also. This has both horizontal as well as vertical symmetry. This photograph has a horizontal as well as vertical symmetry. Both symmetry are there. You can cut from the center vertically, you can cut from the horizontal. Both would look same. So occasionally you can find a photograph like this, which has a both vertical and horizontal symmetry. So if I'll ask you, this can, if I ask you what kind of symmetry it has, vertical or horizontal, then the answer is it has both. Very rarely, as I said, that this kind of photograph you will find. Now look at this photograph. What kind of symmetry it has? Horizontal, because you can cut from there and this is a reflection. So there could be a MSQ. When in FTI entrance exam, there is a question called MSQ, in which means there could be more than one answer would be correct. So they can say a photograph can have only a horizontal symmetry. A photograph may have a vertical symmetry. Photograph may have horizontal and vertical symmetry. So which is the most appropriate sentence? Second one. Horizontal as well as vertical. Not only just horizontal. So they can be a confusing statement which you need to able to understand and figure it out. Now this is again a horizontal symmetry because it can be cut from the center and it is just a reflection into the mirror. The vertical symmetry, the elements in your scene does not need to be identical. ये बहुत important चीज है. Vertical, जैसे मैंने अभी बोला कि कुतुब मीनार को बीच में से काट दो, तो कुतुब मीनार जैसा ही फोटोग्राफ आपको नहीं मिलेगा. जब आप बाहर जाएंगे, you will find lot of photograph which is look like, which is having, I'll show you some other photograph just below it, which has a vertical symmetry, but not exactly which is on the left side would also be a right side. They will be more or less same. We call it as a more or less same, not exactly the same, but more or less same. Like all of you, if you cut from the center, you will be, your hairstyle on the left side is not exactly hairstyle on the right side, but rest of the part of your body would be exactly the same. So when you cut the head from the center, it will be, we call it as a more or less same. Because most of the time, if you see, hairstyle is from the left side. Okay. So element in your scene does not need to be identical as long as they are similar enough in terms of visual weight. ये बात करेंगे हम visual weight की, क्या चक्कर है visual weight जो है, and general appearance, then they will appear balanced. दिखाते हैं हम अभी आपको फोटो. Architecture images are some of the most obvious example because there are so many clean lines to follow that it becomes obvious. However, vertical symmetry can also be extended to nature and people photography as well. अभी आपको एक फोटोग्राफ में दिखाता हूं. इसके अंदर अगर आपको सेंटर से काट दिया जाए इसको, तो आपको जो चर्च दिखाई दे रहा है बैक साइड में या क्लॉक टावर दिखाई दे रहा है एब्सोल्यूट बैक में, तो लेफ्ट और राइट साइड के अंदर आपको जो है कलर अलग है बिल्डिंग्स का. ठीक है, जो बोट है वो भी अलग है, बट it is a river inside some city, maybe Rome or wherever it is in Italy, and it could be, but more or less they are same. They are similar kind of building on the left as well as right. Boats are there in the left, boats are right, but not exactly the same. But it is still, we call it as a symmetrical photograph. We still call it as a symmetrical photograph because both sides are the similar. ऐसा नहीं है कि right side में एक road जा रहा है और वहां पे बस चल रही है, ऐसा नहीं है. तो सेंटर से अगर आप इसको काटते हैं, so it looks same on both the side. So the element in your scene don't need to be identical as long as they are similar enough in terms of visual weight and general appearance, then they will appear balanced. तो इस फोटोग्राफ को आप बैलेंस बोलेंगे? Yes. क्यों? क्योंकि it is a symmetrical photograph which are having a similar object when you cut it from the center to the left or right. Again, another photograph, if you look at it carefully. Now, left side has a little lighter color, and the right side has a of a darker color. So colors are different, but more or less they are similar. If you cut from the center, they would look left and right would be the similar, though the colors are different. So we will call it as a vertical symmetry. So say again. Because it is a mirror also. So both kind of symmetries are there, but exactly if you look more carefully, the below part is more darker than the sky because it is a reflection. But you can tend, as I said, more or less they are same, so you can call it as a vertical and horizontal symmetry, but it is more of a vertical symmetry than the horizontal one. If you use the exact language, then it will be called like this. Now you look at this image. Let me just increase the size of this thing. will be better. Yeah. If you look at this image, this is a image of a street somewhere in China or Hong Kong, where the left and right side has more or less similar kind of houses, but the color scheme is not exactly the same. On the right side, it is more of pinkish. Left side, it is more of warm color. And in the center, you see the bluish kind of a thing. But still, we call it as a vertical symmetrical photo. Vertical symmetry is there because the kind of houses are on the left side. On the right side also, similar kind of houses are there. So you need to be careful in terms of when composing that these element, one of these element, it can have a 2 element also, it can have a 3 element also. We are discussing so many elements which will make a photograph good. So whenever there will be among various videos which many of you people have, or those who are preparing for FTI, one of the lecture is about the regularized photograph, which came previous year, a couple of years, 2 years back, I suppose, which I mentioned yesterday also. The complete analysis being discussed in that particular video. You just need to check out. You must have seen already, but if not, then do study that video because it has a couple of elements which are being discussed in that. So now we will talk about a negative space. ये negative space का बड़ा चक्कर होता है photograph के अंदर. We will discuss here quickly for your benefit. एक मिनट को छूट ना गया हो पहले. Okay, nothing is being left. Fine. So what exactly is this negative space? So there is another. This is a texture. This is only one. Okay. So when used carefully, negative space add value to an image by providing a lot of empty space to create balance for a particular subject. तो इसमें कुछ है नहीं. You are creating, you are leaving a certain part just empty. Negative space. जैसे lighting के अंदर हम बोलते हैं negative fill. Lighting जब हम करते हैं तो उसमें negative fill क्या होता है? Negative fill is that you are blocking the fill light which is falling over there. Suppose आपके face के ऊपर 100-foot candle light fall कर रहा है. So by using a black cloth on a frame, we cut down that light and make it 50 or 25. So that is what we call it as a negative fill, because we are not adding the fill to it, but we are cutting down the already existing fill light over there. That is what we call as a negative. तो आपने देखा होगा कई बार किसी frame के ऊपर जो है black cloth से they cut down the light falling on the face, and we call it as a negative fill. You are not adding to it, but you are cutting down it. So many a times you cut down the more of something. For example, if you go to a shop of a jewelry shop, for example, you see so much of a light is happening over there. So when you're shooting, some light may be distracting. So you switch off those lights and then you take a photograph with the existing light. So lighting does not mean always to add more light, but lighting also can be a means by cut down certain number of lights, switch off certain lights so that the photograph would look better, not the distracting one. So negative space, I have just told you, it is often used successfully in travel photos, where brightly colored walls or buildings often offer a great canvas for a person to be posed against. Often as they walk past, जरूरी नहीं है, मगर ये ऐसा जो एक example दे दिया है, space can affect the balance of an image. Using too little space can create a sense of clutter and imbalance, while using too much space can create a sense of emptiness and imbalance. Using space in moderation creates a sense of balance and harmony. एक photograph इसके नीचे है जिसको आप थोड़ा ध्यान से देखेंगे तो आपको समझ आएगा. Now look at this photograph very carefully. Now this shot has a lot of negative space on the left and underneath the flower because of the curving step and dynamic angle of the flower. Dynamic मतलब angular position के ऊपर है, ना तो straight है ना एकदम head on है. This image has a lot of movement for the eye. The negative space offers a calming balance to that image. तो अगर आप देखेंगे ऊपर इसमें ऊपर का पूरा almost like a 40% of the space, there is nothing over there. Below the flower also you see, on just exactly below the flower, the space is white. तो अगर आप इसको mathematically calculate करने बैठेंगे ऊपर का space और नीचे का space, तो it will become roughly around a 60% of the space is empty. There is nothing over there. But at the same time, background में अगर आप ध्यान से देखेंगे, ये भी balance का एक element है. इसके अंदर एक छोटा सा background में out of focus flower है. तो एक point पे जाके हम लोग discuss करेंगे depth को. Depth can also create a balance. तो उसके अंदर जरूरी नहीं है कि सब कुछ फोकस में हो 100%. By using the depth of field, we make the background as a blur. Now, had this photograph in the background would have been more sharp, then it would be disturbing to the main flower. Main flower को जो है, it would be disturbing. Right now, it is complementing. तो उसमें size के ऊपर depend करता है. बहुत सारे factor हैं जो हम लोग धीरे-धीरे discuss करेंगे today. So what happened here is, the background out of focus flower is adding to the balance of the main flower. Okay, so how the depth of field can add, or blurriness of the background can help to enhance the main subject. So this is also important. This is an example of the negative space. Negative space बहुत सारे photographs में कई बार इस्तेमाल होता है. We will talk about that also further. There is one more photograph in which negative space is there in terms of, because there is nothing over there. It's called gaze, where just the look of a person is directing that this eyes are very, very important of this man, and it also gives the direction in which he is looking at it. So use of a negative space is giving a direction to the viewer also. Okay, what is the most important part? Okay, now we are entering into something which is a little tricky to understand, but not that much. We will talk about texture in a different sense also here. Texture does not mean the texture of tree or texture of a surface. Texture also has some more meanings to it. We will talk about here in this particular images. So small areas with interesting texture, first the literary, small areas with interesting texture in a photo can be balanced by a large area of smooth, untextured element. जैसा मैंने पहले बताया, if you look at the thermocol texture and if you look at the texture of a tree, there's a hell lot of a difference. So sometimes if there is a heavy texture, it can be balanced by a smooth texture. Using too much texture can create a sense of chaos and imbalance, while using too little texture can create a sense of monotony. Monotony in the sense, जब जैसे wall है, this is a plain wall, there is nothing interesting about it. But if you wanted to make it more interesting, we can use the rollers and we can create an interesting texture to it. Using texture in moderation creates a sense of balance and harmony. जैसे मैंने बताया कि if there is a heavy texture, we can balance it with a lighter one. Texture can be present in different ways. In the image of the spoons with spices, नीचे एक image आएगा, उसको दिखाएंगे हम. The image of the spoon with spices, there are three layers of texture. One, the background surface, the spices in the spoon, and some scattered spices. अब आप बोलोगे scattered spices से कहाँ से texture बन गया? We will show it. While there is a lot of texture in the image, its balance due to the scale and the blending layer in between, which softens the difference between the spices and the industrial background. If the extra scattered spices were not there, it would not work as well as they help transition the eye around the image. ये बहुत important photograph है, इसको ध्यान से देखिए. Product shoot के अंदर हम इस type का इस्तेमाल करते हैं. एक आधा product shoot यहाँ पे अगर लगा होगा तो आप देखेंगे उस वाले room के अंदर, direction room के अंदर लगा हुआ है, in which we use the beans of coffee. Coffee beans are being scattered over there. When we are shooting the Nescafe pack, we are also using the beans of there. So here you see this scattered. This scattered से क्या है? This is also creating a kind of a balance. So you can see variety of the colors as well as position of the spoons and the scattering of this thing and the industrial background, which means it could be a surface, it could be anything. So texture can be present in different ways. In the image of the spoon with the spices, there are three. ये मैंने वहाँ पे पहले लिख दिया है, इसको मैं यहाँ से हटा देता हूँ. ये background ये दोबारा से यहाँ पे आ गया है, दोबारा से ऊपर आ गया है, but doesn't matter. I'll just remove this thing from here. ये text जो है एक बार दोबारा आ गई है. Remove this. So, okay, guys, this is what we have already discussed. Now look at the next image. So this blueberry shot uses texture in a different way, where the subject themselves become the textual element with some added interest in the form of water droplets. Without the droplets, it was much less interesting image. and the fine details of the droplet help balance out the size of the berries, giving the eyes more elements to engage with. So इसमें इसकी position देखेंगे आप, some part are from the top, some part are from the below, and these water kind of droplets are creating more interest to it. पैक शॉट के अंदर ये सब चीजें हम लोग इस्तेमाल करते हैं. Suppose the surface is there, उसको to make it more interesting, what we do is we put the oil first and then we spray the water. So oil की वजह से क्या है, the water droplets become collective, so we can feel those water droplets the way it is being felt over here. So these are added interest. You can call it as a icing on the cake. So this is another example of the texture. So think tree bark, pattern on the water, brick walls, crack in the pavement, cloud in the sky, foliage in the garden, shiny reflective metal, stone in a pond, sand at the beach. Think long exposure to produce soft foamy waterfalls. मैं भी बताता हूँ ये क्या चक्करबाजी है. और interesting cloud patterns. Consider ICM, intentional camera movement. इसके बारे में थोड़ा बताता हूँ मैं आपको. For soft blurred effect or pretty light trail. लॉन्ग एक्सपोजर टू प्री. अब कुछ नीचे एक फोटोग्राफ है, मैं आपको जल्दी से दिखाता हूं. इस फोटोग्राफ के अंदर जो इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट है, दैट इज द वाटर बीइंग ब्लर्ड. यस्टरडे आल्सो आई टॉक्ड अबाउट द मैन कॉल्ड अर्नेस्ट हास हु हैज वर्कड ऑन द ब्लरी इमेजेस. इतना मोटा किताब है ललित एकेडमिक लाइब्रेरी के अंदर दिल्ली में, कभी जाओगे तो आप देख सकते हो. 2-3 हजार का किताब होना चाहिए, व्हिच टॉक्स अबाउट ओनली द ब्लर फोटोग्राफ. So this is not by Ernest Haas, but I picked up from somewhere else. So this is an example of adding a texture. Water could be frozen, but here the water is blurred. So to get this outdoor jo, when you shoot at the outdoor, the exposure is f11 and you're shooting with a 125 shutter speed with a say 100 ASA. So 125 shutter speed or maybe higher shutter speed, the water will not be blurred. So to get that, you have to have a slow shutter speed. Now, in order to get a slow shutter speed, you need to cut down the light, and hence there's a filter called ND filter. ND3, ND6, ND9. Sometimes you use ND9 also, so that your shutter speed will go down up to 1/30th, 1/15th of a second, or maybe half a second, so that the water will become blurred. It depends. You have to experiment a couple of times to get the how much exposure required. Rest of the part is raw. Rock will not move even if you shoot at a shutter speed of 1/half a second. 1/half a second or 1/10th of a second, 1/15th of a second, rock will remain raw. So most of the time when you shoot photograph like this, ये पूछा जा सकता है कि what are the important parameter you will employ when shooting a waterfall having a blurred photograph of water. So you have to use the elements. A, you have to use the tripod. ये कहीं लिखा हुआ है वो सारे वीडियो जो टेक्स्ट है हमारे पास, MCQ इसका सिनेमेटोग्राफी का जो टेक्स्ट पार्ट का जो एक्सेस है वेबसाइट का, उसके अंदर सब क्वेश्चन आंसर में ये सब चीजें लिखी हुई हैं वहां पर. You have to use the tripod, you have to use the longer shutter speed, you have to use a wide angle shot. Why? Because everything else should be in a sharp focus. And hence use of ND filter to cut down the intensity of light, because outdoor it has a too much of a light to control. तो ये वो है. और ये intentional camera movement का क्या मतलब है? Sometimes you see a background is being blurred. So what you do is you move the camera along with the object. Suppose a car is going, so you press the shutter and move the camera. So car will remain more or less, I would not say 100% sharp. Car will remain more or less in focus because you're moving. A movement of the hand is there along with the car, but the background would be blurred. So that is called intentional camera movement. So these are the few example of the texture. बैकग्राउंड जो है ब्लर्ड में आता है उसके अंदर. कुरसावा का कुछ एक फिल्म है जैसे रोशमन, अगर आप देखेंगे तो उसमें कैरेक्टर जब भाग रहा है तो दे स्विच पैन टू गो टू अनदर. तो स्विच पैन भी अगर आप देखेंगे, स्विच पैन में कुछ शार्प नहीं होता है. वन सब्जेक्ट टू अनदर सब्जेक्ट, इट इज यूज्ड एज अ ट्रांजिशन इन द फिल्म, बट हियर इट इज मोर ऑफ दैट. So if something like that is there in a photograph, you should be able to notice it. So here, important thing is blurry of the water. Okay, now this is has lot of element into it, is called visual weight. तो visual weight क्या क्या है कि मेजर तो नहीं कर सकते वेट के 10 ग्राम है, 20 ग्राम है, 1 किलो, 2 किलो. वेट का मतलब जो होता है, हम लोग फिजिक्स के अंदर जब वेट की बात करते हैं तो वी टॉक अबाउट इन टर्म्स ऑफ ग्राम, बट हियर विजुअल वेट. So how you are going to figure it out what is the visual weight in a photograph? Is there any visual weight? Can you integrate visual weight in a photograph? Can you balance it? All those things which we are going to discuss in this photograph. So visual weight is a term given to compositional element within an image and how much visual impact they have. Something will feel heavier or some or more present within the image in comparison to other elements. Sometimes you look at a photograph, one part you notice more carefully. Why? Because it is so prominent. It is so prominent. जैसे कल हम लोग बात कर रहे थे, perspective की बात कर रहे थे. Something which is in the foreground will have a much more importance. If the same object is lying in the back side, it will not have a importance. So positioning of an object inside the frame will also create a visual balance. Whenever an element stands out from the rest of your image, it holds some level of visual weight. The amount depends upon number of factors. So what are those factors which will make something heavy or something lighter? Visually we are talking about, because photograph will have a visual. This term visual weight is also being discussed by a very important man called Rudolf Arnium. इसका एक किताब है Art and Visual Perception, A Psychology of Creative Eye. विकिपीडिया के अंदर से इमेज लिया है मैंने, और ये किताब बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट बुक है. हमारी जो वेबसाइट है उसके ऊपर कहीं ना कहीं हमने लोड किया हुआ है सिनेमेटोग्राफी के अंदर इंपॉर्टेंट बुक्स डाउनलोड. अगर आप जाएंगे वेबसाइट पे तो वहां पर आपको कहीं ना कहीं ये बुक जो है पीडीएफ फाइल उसका मिल जाएगा. नेट पे भी ढूंढ सकते हैं, बट देयर यू विल डेफिनेटली फाइंड. सो व्हाट रुडोल्फ सेज, the visual weight is a visual force which prevails in the image balance. According to Rudolf, the visual weight together with the direction are properties which exercise more influence in the balance of an image. अब इस फोटोग्राफ के अंदर नीचे एक फोटोग्राफ है, उसमें ऐसे लग रहा है कि कुछ right of, when you look at toward the yellow part, because the arrow kind of thing is there. तो ऐसा लगता है कि बाहर की तरफ को कुछ इंटरेस्टिंग है. ये पूरा फोटोग्राफ जो है इट्स लाइक लुक लाइक ए ट्रैवलिंग टुवर्ड द राइट. इस फोटोग्राफ को अगर ध्यान से देखो तो ऐसा लगता है ये कुछ इमेज है जो राइट की तरफ ट्रैवल कर रही है. ऐसा नहीं लगता कि लेफ्ट की तरफ ट्रैवल कर रही है. इस फोटोग्राफ में कहीं ऐसा लगता है कि लेफ्ट की तरफ जा रहा है ये. अगर मान लो एक कार्ट है, सपोज वी कंसीडर डाउन पार्ट एज ए व्हील एंड बैक साइड एज ए बॉडी ऑफ सम स्मॉल ऑब्जेक्ट, so it look like as if it is going to the right side. So the direction, because of the angular element, give you a force toward the right. Okay, this object, something right, it is moving towards. Are you getting it? So there is no arrow as such, but just because of the triangle position. अगर ये triangle को उठा के नीचे रख दोगे और blue को अगर ऊपर रख दोगे तो ऐसा लगेगा ये फोटोग्राफ नीचे की तरफ जाए, right? और इस triangle को red की जगह रख दोगे तो it look like as if it is going to the left side. So just by positioning of this yellow object, the force which the image is exerting and also pressurizing you to look at and give you a feeling that as if it is going to the left or right or bottom will change according to the positioning of this yellow triangle. तो ये बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग एग्जांपल है कि कैसे एक पोजीशन को चेंज करने से आपका जो है फोर्स जो है चेंज हो जाएगा. These terms, these words are very, very important. According to Rudolf, the visual weight मतलब किस तरफ धक्का लग रहा है, together with the direction are properties which exercise more influence in the balance of an image. थोड़ा बात करते हैं अलग अलग एलिमेंट्स की कि विजुअल वेट के अंदर क्या क्या चीजें आती हैं. फर्स्ट इज अ टोनल बैलेंस. टोन की बात हो रही है, टोनल वैल्यू की बात हो रही है. दिस काइंड ऑफ एसिमेट्रिकल बैलेंस, ये टर्म एसिमेट्रिकल हम बात और डिस्कस करेंगे बाद में आके, बट यहाँ पर थोड़ा समझ लीजिए इसको किस कॉन्टेक्स्ट के अंदर बात हो रही है. दिस काइंड ऑफ asymmetrical balance is best in monochromatic or black and white images where different tones are easily distinguishable. In this case, tonal balance appear in terms of contrast between lighter and darker areas within an image. अब quickly इस फोटोग्राफ को आप देखिए. इसके अंदर आपको तीन टाइप का ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट का टोन दिखाई दे रहा है. पिच व्हाइट, मोर और लेस पिच ब्लैक एंड इन बिटवीन ग्रे इन द सेकंड लेवल. ये फॉग है कहीं पर जिसकी वजह से आपको ऐसा महसूस हो रहा है, बट कंप्लीटली फॉग भी नहीं है. फॉग वाले दिन अगर आप ध्यान से देखेंगे तो till 5 feet you can easily see. Sometimes there is too much of a fog, then maybe after 2 feet you can't see. Sometimes the density of fog is less, then you can see the image till 50 feet or 20 feet. After that, there is a fog. तो इसमें जो है 20 फीट तक जो है 30 फीट तक का जो इमेज है फ्रंट पार्ट जो है you can clearly see and rest of the part you cannot. So here we call it as a tonal balance. इसके अंदर जो है फोटोग्राफ के अंदर there is something called tonal balance in this particular photograph. We'll move little further and then we will talk about visual weight in terms of image placement within the frame. जैसे मैंने पहले बताया, something if you keep in a foreground comparative to the background, then it will become more important. So there is a relationship also where you want to give an emphasis. जिस चीज को emphasis देना चाहते हैं, that should be in a और भी एलिमेंट है पोजीशन का इन द सेंस फोरग्राउंड वर्सेस बैकग्राउंड भी हो सकता है, मिडिल ग्राउंड भी हो सकता है. सो इमेज प्लेसमेंट विद इन फ्रेम कैन चूज टू मेक समथिंग हैवियर और लाइटर. जो बाहर फ्रंट में है दैट विल लुक मोर हैवी बिकॉज द साइज इज बिगर. A position in terms of the foreground, background, and also anything which comes in the foreground would look a little bigger and hence would look more heavy. So that is what here it means. Second is the size. कोई चीज, suppose something comes in the foreground, then the size of that object will also look a little bigger. It can also happen like in that photograph of Raghurai, there's a big rock over there. The rock is very big, against which a musician is singing and people are coming from their work or maybe going to the work. That is also a debate. ये लोग जा रहे हैं काम पर या आ रहे हैं, जा रहे हैं और आ रहे हैं वाला चक्कर भी है उसके अंदर. So size also matters a lot. So if the object is of heavy size, bigger size, then obviously it will carry a more visual weight than some object which is of a smaller size. So perhaps the most obvious factor, bigger objects hold more weight than the smaller one and therefore attracts the viewer's attention more. In general, it is best to make your main subject the biggest object and support it with the smaller object. Smaller thing would act as a complement to the main thing, right? So size is another element of the visual weight. Then something called contrast. So similarly, areas of higher contrast naturally draw your attention. A light object on a dark background, or vice versa, is a great way to focus the viewer's attention on your main subject. A smaller area of white in a photo can be balanced by a larger area of black or vice versa. Each one does not have to be the exact same size or intensity. Intensity का मतलब थोड़ा मैं और समझाने की कोशिश करूंगा आप लोगों को. Size मैंने आपको बता दिया है. Suppose a red color is too much of a red. We'll show you the color wheel. Then sometime it could be a pastel red, where the white is being mixed over there. So red is pure red or it is a pastel red. That depends upon it. Now this is a blue, but it is not a stark blue. Like his shirt is a stark blue. This color is a little pastel color because white is being mixed into it and it has become a pastel. So contrast is a very important thing in terms of black and white, or the darker color versus lighter color. In color theory, we use the word contrast is used in many ways. So it can be one of the question. Explain what do you understand by contrast in terms of black and white and color photograph. So that is what we are discussing here. So a small area of white in a photograph can be balanced by a large area of black and vice versa. Now tone की बात अभी जैसे अभी हमने करी. Darker item have more visually weight than the lighter one if your subject is light tone. Light color element means a light feel. Dark color elements means a heavy feel. Okay, so this is little extension of that term. Color and saturation, visual color. इसके ऊपर हम थोड़ा और आगे डिटेल में बात करेंगे visual weight के अंदर. Bright colors, darker areas are heavier on the eyes and are best balanced by a bigger, lighter areas. Bold, bright colors stand out more than the subtle, neutral shades. A burst of contrasting color against a more monochromatic background provides a strong focal point in your photograph. इसका quick example हम आपको नीचे अभी दिखाएंगे. Look at this photograph. The brightly colored paper boards in this shot act as an effective color counterbalance to the extreme positioning of the woman as well as the white background. This is an example of what we just spoke about. Color and saturation की जो बात कर रहे थे हम लोग. Then there are lines. इसका image यहाँ पर नहीं है, but this we have already discussed yesterday when we were talking about the rule of third. Rule of third, leading lines, pattern of lines, zigzag lines. So it also carries a visual weight. Lines can affect and balance of an image using diagonal lines. जैसे हमने circular एक photograph था, nuts and bolts का दिखाया था, एक टायर का जो था, जिसमें light left से आ रहा था. That was also an example of the lines. How lines can create a balance into a photograph. So lines can affect the balance of an image. Using diagonal lines, create a sense of tension and movement, while using a horizontal and vertical lines, create a sense of stability and balance. Lines can also be used to guide the viewer's eye through the image, creating a sense of balance and harmony. So ये lines के ऊपर is a part of the visual weight. Sometimes there are very clear lines, whether it's a straight line, whether it's a curvilinear line. Yesterday we also discussed in the graphic photograph where the image could be a circular, rectangular. They are shaped. But if it is a straight line or curvilinear line, then it becomes clear-cut example of the visual way. ये फोटोग्राफ जो मैं बार-बार पहले भी बोल रहा था, negative space की बात हो रही है इसके अंदर, अगर आप ध्यान से देखेंगे, तो this is also an element of visual way. It's called gaze. दो शब्दों का हम लोग इस्तेमाल करते हैं. एक शब्द होता है देखना, एक होता है घूरना. देखना और घूरना में दोनों में आईज की जो इंटेंसिटी है उससे फर्क पड़ता है. When you say किसी को घूर रहा है, to look at and to stare, these are two different terms which has a different meaning. Which means when you're staring at something, you are focusing much more on that. Okay. So here it is a gaze. When you look at someone normally, and when you look at someone with anger, there's a lot of difference. There's a lot of difference when you look dagger at someone, we call it as a looking angry. So here, if your image includes a person, viewer will naturally follow the direction of their gaze. This lends weight to what would otherwise be empty space. अगर ये इस side ना देख रहा हो और मान लो ये नीचे देख रहा है, for example, his eyes are looking down. So this negative space will be of no use. Then it will be not creating a balance. But just because his eyes is looking into that direction, this is getting a balance. So how the negative space is being balanced by the gaze is an example of this particular photograph, that this lends a weight to what otherwise would be empty space and can be effective counterbalance on its own. So how the negative space is being balanced here by the gaze. उधर वहां पर flower जो है, अगर तुम ध्यान से उस photograph को, I'll just go quickly to that photograph of the flower thing. If you look at that flower, this is also a kind of a subtle gaze. आंख नहीं है यहाँ पर, but the flower is looking toward there. You got my point? So the empty space has a meaning here. The way the gaze of an eye added the meaning over there. If the eyes would be looking down, then the negative space would not be balancing. Similarly, here the flower's face of the flower, which is the upper part, is looking toward that, is flowering into that direction, and that's why the negative space gets a meaning here. So both the places, negative space is there. But if this photograph, the negative space will not be balancing. Had this gaze would not be there, had it been looking down, then the photograph would not be a balanced photograph. We will not call it as a visually balanced photograph. Another element is a text. कभी भी photograph के अंदर अगर text होगा, that you will be able to pay more attention. पूरे photograph के अंदर अगर ये sandal लिखा हुआ है यहाँ पर, अगर ये ना लिखा हो, then the whole focus is going to the sandals here. नीचे तो कुछ वैसे ही लिखा हुआ कहीं जहां से इमेज आया है ये. So as literature being, we look for and try to make sense out of the letters and patterns. Our eyes are drawn to signs or text of any kind in an image. Being aware of this can help you remember to avoid text in your if you really want the focus to be something else. अब ये पीछे बोर्ड है, मान लीजिए जैसे सिनेमेटोग्राफी वर्कशॉप बाय सुधीर के चौधरी क्राफ्ट फिल्म स्कूल. अगर ये निकल, सबसे पहले इस बोर्ड पे अगर आप देखोगे तो you will not look at the images below. which are where there are so many posters over there. But first thing you look at the text, and then you look at the कौन से photographs उसने shoot किए, कौन सी फिल्में बनाई हैं, that you pay attention to that. So text will give you more attention to something which is of the image. So if you wanted the image to be paid more attention, then text should be avoided. That is the meaning of this particular thing. ये photograph हम लोग discuss कर चुके हैं. एक और important term जो अभी हमने ऊपर बात की है visual weight की, इसमें boat जो foreground के अंदर है, this is a normal shot taken maybe with a 50 mm or 25 mm lens, because it is a wide angle, so maybe 25 mm, but it is not closer to the boat. Look at the photograph. It is not closer to the boat, but still being in the foreground, it gets a importance. So as the largest object in the scene, the boat in the foreground carries the most visual weight, with the city and sunset providing extra interest and balance. So this is also an example of the boat. पहले हम जो tonal की बात की है हमने, वो इस photograph के अंदर आप देखेंगे. तो tonal quality है in terms of particular hue, which is light or which is this orangish kind of background, early morning, warm color. In the foreground, there is hardly any color over there. So it's a kind of a black image or black and white kind of image. But with this, you can't say it's a black and white image because there is a warmth in the background of the color. This is also example of the tonal balance. So visual weight के अंदर और बहुत सारी important चीजें होती हैं जिसको हम लोग पहले भी हम लोगों ने बात किया है. Again we are discussing that. It's called focus. Depth of field का focus से बहुत लेना देना होता है. What is, when you say wide, when a shot is having a maximum depth of field, it means everything in the foreground to background is in focus sharp. Most of the shot which are shot outdoor, to have a maximum depth of field, your aperture has to be higher side, 11 or 16. Also, when we wanted to have a higher depth of field, we shoot with the wide angle lenses. Third is the distance between the subject and the camera. So we increase that subject so that we can have a more depth of field. So focus and telephoto lens. If you are using a telephoto lens, the depth of field will be less. If you are using a wide angle lens, then the depth of field will be more. So focus जो है, फिल्म में फोटोग्राफ के अंदर सब कुछ फोकस में होना चाहिए? No. Not necessarily everything should be in a sharp focus. For example, in portrait photography, you see background is being blurred out if it is not interested. Similarly, below is there. So object in sharp focus hold more weight than those which are out of focus. This is particularly useful for reducing the impact of unwanted element in your scene. Background में कुछ फालतू की चीजें हैं, तो उसको हटा तो नहीं सकते. So what you can do is you can make it out of focus. Adjust your depth of field to blur distraction and pull attention back to the main subject. Okay, so depth of field is important over here. And look at this photograph, for example. Now imagine the shot below if the aperture was more like f11. मतलब depth of field इसमें बहुत ज्यादा होता. 11 का मतलब depth of field अगर ज्यादा होता तो पीछे का background जो है blur नहीं होता. So if all the foliage and trees in the background were in the focus, then the cones would be lost against it. Portrait photographers use this concept to their advantage, shooting their subject in a similar way to get them stand out from sometime messy or distracting background. So background, if it's not interested, you can blur it out and your subject would be focused. Like this image is much better image. Why? Because the background is made out of focus. All the greenery is out of focus. So to give the more weightage, sometimes you use the depth of field, which is means focus and hence depth of field. हाँ जी, ये थोड़ा सा चक्करबाजी वाला कॉन्सेप्ट है, कॉन्सेप्चुअल एंड एब्स्ट्रैक्ट बैलेंस. ये एब्स्ट्रैक्ट बैलेंस क्या चीज है और कॉन्सेप्चुअल बैलेंस क्या है, इसके ऊपर थोड़ा सा और डिस्कस करते हैं. समझ लोगे तो आसान हो जाएगा, नहीं समझोगे थोड़ा टाइम लगेगा, बट समझ आ जाएगा. So conceptual balance is a philosophical variety of asymmetrical balance. Asymmetrical balance थोड़ा बताएंगे हम लोग और आगे चल के. Symmetrical balance तो आपको बता दिया है कि something which is both the sides similar. Asymmetrical balance और डिस्कस करेंगे हम लोग. So actually shift कर देना चाहिए मुझे, पहले asymmetrical balance होना चाहिए था, जिससे थोड़ा आसान हो जाता. Anyway, so conceptual balance is a philosophical variety of asymmetrical balance where two subjects complement each other and are different beyond size, shape and form. क्या मतलब हुआ इसका कि दो चीजें तो होंगी उसके अंदर बट जरूरी नहीं है वो एक जैसी. We create this by using contrasting two ideas. एक रिच आदमी है मान लीजिए, पीछे शाहरुख खान का फोटोग्राफ है और बाहर जो है एक आदमी बैठा हुआ है भीख मांग रहा है. वॉल के ऊपर आप देखें, वॉल के ऊपर कोई पेंटिंग है या कोई होर्डिंग है, मान लीजिए कोई फोटोग्राफ है, कोई एक आदमी ब्रिज के ऊपर बैठा हुआ, नीचे ब्रिज के डेप्थ होती है तो नीचे ब्रिज के ऊपर कोई फोटोग्राफ लगा हो सकता है किसी फिल्म का, किसी ग्लैमरस फिल्म का. उसके फोरग्राउंड में आप देख रहे हैं कि एक बैगर जो है वहां पर भीख मांग रहा है. सो थीम रिचनेस वर्सेस पुअर. सो नेचर वर्सेस इंडस्ट्री. क्या मतलब हुआ इसका कि बाहर तो फोरग्राउंड में तो बहुत सारे फूल पौधे वौधे हैं, ग्रीनरी है और बैकग्राउंड में कोई फैक्ट्री का फोटोग्राफ. बैकग्राउंड में कोई बहुत लंबा चौड़ा फैक्ट्री है, उसे कोई धुआं निकल रहा है. दैट इज अ कंट्रास्ट. नेचर वर्सेस फैक्ट्री. हैप्पी वर्सेस सैड. एज आई सेड कि पीछे जो है कोई आदमी खुश है बहुत ज्यादा, कोई बहुत हैप्पीनेस का सीन है और फोरग्राउंड में उसके जो है कोई आदमी. हाँ, जैसे मान लीजिए इसका और अच्छा एक इंटरेस्ट हो सकता है कि बैकग्राउंड में एक होर्डिंग है किसी फिल्म का विच इज हैप्पीनेस, हैप्पी न्यू ईयर फिल्म आई थी उसका कुछ है, या कुछ एनीथिंग विच इज वेरी हैप्पी हाई की काइंड ऑफ अ थिंग, और फोरग्राउंड से किसी आदमी का जनाजा, कोई आदमी डेड बॉडी लेके जा रहा है. सैडनेस वर्सेस हैप्पीनेस. क्वालिटी वॉल वाला था बट वो एग्जैक्टली वो नहीं कह सकते, बट वहां रिचनेस वर्सेस पुअर, रिच वर्सेस पुअर का एग्जांपल है उसके अंदर. तो हैप्पीनेस वर्सेस सैड हो गया, तो कंट्रास्ट है इसके अंदर समटाइम. हाँ, मतलब वही डेथ वर्सेस लाइफ हो गया, वो लाइफ वर्सेस डेथ हो सकता है. So contrast between these two subjects help to show the passage of time, the variety of line on our planet, variety of life on our planet. As I said, rich versus poor, difference in viewpoint in the sense कि कोई आदमी जो है एक कुछ फॉर एग्जांपल कांग्रेस का झंडा पकड़ के खड़ा हुआ है फोरग्राउंड में, या बीजेपी का झंडा पकड़ के खड़ा हुआ, और पीछे जो है कोई कम्युनिस्ट का दीवार के ऊपर जो है पेंटिंग किया हुआ है, जो सीपीएम का कोई पोस्टर है बैकग्राउंड में, फॉर एग्जांपल लेनिन का फोटोग्राफ है बैकग्राउंड में, और फोरग्राउंड के अंदर कोई कांग्रेस का झंडा लेके कांग्रेस की रैली जा रही है या कुछ और जा रहा है. तो दिस इज अ कंट्रास्ट. दिस इज अ कंट्रास्ट. कम्युनिज्म बिलोंग्स टू समथिंग एल्स एंड दिस इज बिलोंग्स टू डिफरेंट आइडियोलॉजी ऑल टुगेदर. सो दिस इज अ कंट्रास्ट इन टर्म्स ऑफ पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी है. एक फिल्म है, कभी तुम लोग देखोगे, डायरेक्शन वाले जरूर देखेंगे, इसका नाम है बर्न्ट बाय द सन. फिल्म जो है उसका नाम है बर्न्ट बाय द सन. इसके अंदर एक खतरनाक सीन है बैकग्राउंड के अंदर, वो दैट इज द बेस्ट फॉरेन लैंग्वेज ऑस्कर विनिंग फिल्म आल्सो. और मैंने अपनी जिंदगी में 2 लोगों के ऑटोग्राफ लिए हैं, एक इस डायरेक्टर का लिया है. तो उसमें ही वाज इन गोवा फिल्म फेस्टिवल आल्सो along with his little daughter who acted in that film. तो उसके अंदर पीछे एक बहुत बड़ा एयर बैलून, एक सीन है एंड के अंदर वो जा रहे हैं एंड ही हैज किल्ड दोस पीपल एंड ही इज स्मोकिंग एंड ही सीज अ बिग बैलून on which Lenin photograph is there. Oh, sorry, Stalin is there. And he supposed, because it is that regime, so he salutes that with his cigarette in his hand, even to a balloon. You know, this is very contrasting. कोई आदमी थोड़ी है वहां पर, तो balloon कौन देख रहा है तो मैं balloon को salute करो या ना करो. But his image comes in such a powerful manner that he felt from inside to salute the king of the regime. So sometimes these kind of political things comes over there. So contrast between these two subjects may help to show the passage of time, the variety of life on our planet, the difference in viewpoint. What I was trying to give you an example of difference of viewpoint. There it was a link with the same viewpoint. He believe in that philosophy, and that's why he salute that balloon even also. Most cities would provide many example of conceptual balance. As I said, rich versus poor. Background could be a happy hoarding. Foreground could be a sad scenario. For example, it could be a shot of a very old small building next to a towering skyscraper, or two very different people sitting together on a subway. जैसे मान लीजिए आप मेट्रो पे जा रहे हैं, तो मेट्रो के अंदर जो है वहां पर बहुत सारे लोग जो है उस जो वेटिंग जो चेयर है उसके ऊपर दो लोग ऐसे बैठे हुए मिल सकते हैं। एक ऑर्डिनरी आदमी हो सकता है, एक टाई वाई लगा के कहीं कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर का आदमी बैग वैग लेके बैठा हुआ है। यू कैन सी दिस काइंड ऑफ इमेजेस। अब इसमें मैं आपको थोड़े थोड़े एग्जांपल दिखाता हूँ क्विकली। Now look at this model at the desert. Now this kind of photograph you will see many in the Vogue magazine and also many fashion magazine, in which the rich model is being shot against a very poor background of, say for example, Chandni Chowk, some poor working people over there. When I saw those kind of photograph, I didn't understood in terms of the idea behind it. I thought it's just to basically make that stand out, basically. So the term for that is called conceptual balance. So conceptual balance, we have already talked about it. Now these are the images. You could see this is a typewriter. 1857 में लोग ऐसे टाइप करते थे, अभी जो लोग जो है लैपटॉप पे टाइप करते हैं. Look at this image. This is an old man looking at the mannequin who's having a very fancy dress. So old versus new, fashionable versus traditional. Normal एक आदमी अपना बुजुर्ग आदमी कुछ खरीदने आया होगा यहाँ पे, and he is looking at this mannequin. It's a very interesting image. This is very, as just I said, in the photo above, the two subjects, an old building and a high-rise glass building, are on the left and on the right side of the frame. In addition to the asymmetrical, जो हम बात करेंगे अभी बाद में, colors and tonal balance, conceptual balance is also met as the building showcase the effect of modernization and industrialization. पुरानी बिल्डिंगें टूट रही हैं और नई बिल्डिंगें इस टाइप की आप अगर जाके देखेंगे गुड़गांव के अंदर आपको बहुत सारी ऐसी बिल्डिंगें वहां पर मिल जाएंगी. ओके, सो दिस इज आल्सो एन एग्जांपल ऑफ द कॉन्सेप्चुअल बैलेंस. अब एक ये फोटोग्राफ है जिसके अंदर मॉडर्न सेम गोज फॉर द फोटो ऑफ द टू काइंड ऑफ विंड मिल्स. हाँ जी, रेडियल बैलेंस की बात कर रहे हैं हम. अब ये रेडियल बैलेंस के अंदर थोड़ा सा कंफ्यूजन है जो आप लोगों को ध्यान रखना है कि व्हाट इज रेडियल एंड व्हाट इज सिमेट्रिकल. So radial balance occur when the visual element in the image are arranged around a central point, creating a circular or spiral composition. This type of balance is often seen in natural photography, where the elements are arranged around a focal point like a flower or a tree. Radial symmetry is the third most common form of symmetry we encounter in photography. The mind is pleased by natural order and the circular pattern around in a splashes of water, the human iris, the flower petal, the star trail, sunset, etc., etc. हाँ जी, अब दो तीन चीजें थोड़ा समझ लीजिएगा, अभी फोटोग्राफ में आपको और क्लियर हो जाएगा. ए रेडियल बैलेंस एंड रेडियल सिमेट्री दोनों अलग अलग शब्द है. ये रेडियल बैलेंस एंड ए रेडियल सिमेट्री. जो लोग एफटीआई का एग्जाम दे रहे हैं वो थोड़ा ध्यान से सुन लो, इसके ऊपर कंफ्यूजन पैदा हो सकता है. जो सेंटेंस मैंने लिखे हैं, रेडियल बैलेंस जैसे क्या है, सनलाइट एंड डे लाइट लुक सेम बट दे आर नॉट. देयर इज अ डिफरेंस बिटवीन अ सनलाइट एंड ए डे लाइट. थोड़ा खोपड़ी खुजाना, सोचना, व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन अ डे लाइट एंड ए सनलाइट. So similarly here, radial balance and radial symmetry are not exactly the same, but there are some similarities. Similarity क्या है? An image that follows radial symmetry will also have a radial balance. The image that follow a radial symmetry will also have a radial balance, but an image that follows radial balance may not have a radial symmetry. बात समझ आई? फिजिक्स के अंदर, मैथमेटिक्स में जब थ्योरम होती थी तो उसके अंदर कंडीशंस होती थी. कंडीशंस necessary but not sufficient. It is necessary to have this. If you want to become a president of India, it is necessary to be an Indian citizen. अमेरिकन आदमी आके प्रेसिडेंट नहीं बन जाएगा. You have to be Indian citizen. Citizenship की बात होगी. But that is necessary but not sufficient. इसके अलावा उम्र, एज भी होनी चाहिए उसके ऊपर. उसके ऊपर कोई पुलिस केस ना चल रहा हो, पता लगा केस चल रहा है उसके ऊपर कोई क्रिमिनल, so he cannot become. So that is necessary but not sufficient. So यहाँ पर वही चक्कर है. Image that follow radial symmetry, अगर उसमें radial symmetry है, will also be a radial balance. Radial balance भी होगा, but इसका उल्टा is not valid. मतलब image that follows the radial balance may not have a radial symmetry. अभी quickly मैं आपको समझाता हूँ. So whenever you use the radial symmetry in the photograph, the central part of the picture will coincide with the central part of the scene and element radiate from there. In the case of radial balance, the center part of the scene need not coincide with the center of the picture. जैसे मैं आपको अब दिखाता हूँ, इसको ध्यान से देखिए आप. इस फोटोग्राफ का जो सेंटर है वो नीचे की तरफ छोटा सा दिखाई दे रहा है, 1/3 पॉइंट पे रखा हुआ है इसको. तो इस फोटोग्राफ को अगर मैं सर्कल कंपास लेके एक सर्कल बनाऊं तो उसका सेंटर वहां नहीं आएगा. So this photograph is the example of a radial balance. This photograph is an example of a radial balance. अब रेडियल सिमेट्री की बात जो कर रहे हैं, अब ये वाला है, इसको बीच में से काट दो, लेफ्ट और राइट में एक जैसा. अगर इस फोटोग्राफ को काटोगे, अगर हॉरिजॉन्टली काट दोगे तो ऊपर और नीचे का पार्ट जो है अलग अलग आएगा. आर यू गेटिंग इट? और सेंटर में से भी काटोगे तो लेफ्ट और राइट का पार्ट भी अलग अलग है. ध्यान से देखो. ओके, बट इस फोटोग्राफ को ऊपर से बीच में से काट दो वर्टिकली और या हॉरिजॉन्टली काट दो, दोनों का पार्ट जो है एक जैसा लगेगा और इसका सेंटर जो है सेंटर पे आएगा. आर यू गेटिंग द डिफरेंस बिटवीन रेडियल सिमेट्री एंड रेडियल बैलेंस? पहले वाले फोटोग्राफ में रेडियल बैलेंस है, इस वाले फोटोग्राफ में रेडियल सिमेट्री है एंड हेंस आल्सो रेडियल बैलेंस. अब बात समझे? जिसमें रेडियल सिमेट्री है उसमें रेडियल बैलेंस होगा ही होगा, बट जरूरी नहीं है कि जिसमें रेडियल बैलेंस है उसमें रेडियल सिमेट्री. उल्टा वैलिड. दिस इज एग्जांपल ऑफ रेडियल बैलेंस बट नॉट रेडियल सिमेट्री. फर्क को समझने की कोशिश करो. दो शब्दों में चक्कर है सारा का सारा. ये हमने अभी बात कर ली. हाँ जी, इस फोटोग्राफ को भी ध्यान से देखो. ये रेडियल सिमेट्री का फोटोग्राफ नहीं है बट फिर भी रेडियल बैलेंस का फोटोग्राफ है. करेक्ट? बात समझ आ रही है जो मैं बोल रहा हूं? बहुत जरूरी है. हाँ जी. एसिमेट्रिकल बैलेंस जो अभी तक हम बार बार जो है ऊपर से बोलते आए हैं. अभी 11:30 हो रहा है तो आप लोग सुनते सुनते नहीं थके होंगे क्योंकि आप लोग अपना मोबाइल ऑफ किया हुआ है. सब लोगों ने, 8 लोगों के अलावा. आलू के पराठे खा रहे हो तुम लोग और चाय पी रहे हो. मैं थोड़ा सा चाय पी के आ जाता हूँ. विल मीट एट 12 o'clock. So we are back. अभी तक जो भी कुछ कराया है, if somebody is not able to understand, you can ask it. If you have understood everything, then don't ask. Okay. So we are moving a little further now. So asymmetrical balance is the most important part of this balance discussion we are doing so far. Why it is most important? Because all the time you will not find architecture which is symmetrical or which is having a radial balance, and also artificially you have to organize certain kind of shots which we call it as an intellectual balance, or there is some different term for that. Not intellectual but conceptual balance. Sorry, not intellectual, but yes, you can also call it. There's a very strong department of photography called conceptual photography. There are many photographers which are very well known for a conceptual photography. If you discover that, you will find many people like that in India also. Natarajan is one of the photographer who has shot many conceptual photographs in almost 20 years back, I remember. Now we are moving to the asymmetrical balance. So it is a way to create a balance in a photography composition when one side of the frame holds the main subject, intentionally placing your subject off center, and the other side of the image is balanced by smaller objects or negative space or by colors, means less important subject that contrast with the former in terms of size, color, and general appearance. This is a simple one sentence kind of a definition of asymmetrical balance. Now I'll give you an example and I'll read a little more text to substantiate what I just said. I said using negative space to create a focus on one side of the frame in an effective composition technique. This empty space allows the viewer's eye to explore the image before it falls on the main subject. The empty space acts as a visual weight to balance out the main subject. I'll show you the photograph to talk about what I'm saying now, to substantiate my statement. You may fill the rest of the composition with the smaller object or a simple background, but the focus will remain on the main subject. Here, the using rule of third most interesting location for an image focal point lies on 1/3 in from either edge of the frame or 1/3 down from the top or bottom or up from the bottom. You rule of third ka use karte hain. That's what he is trying to say. In simple terms, this means placing your focus subject off center or on 1/3 of your frame. Therefore, there is no tension between it and other subject in the shot. I'll give you an example of this photograph. Look at this dancer. Who will, if I'll ask you what is the theme of this photograph, you will, all of you will agree that this is a photograph of a dancer. Who will say this is a photograph of a window? Some fool will say that this is a photograph of a window. This is not a photograph of a window, this is a photograph of a dancer. But it is balanced with the window. It is balanced with the window. If the window is not there, for example, would this photograph be called balanced photograph? No. Because this big mass or a form having a particular color, who is balancing it? So something need to be have a balance. So this we call it as a asymmetrical balance. And here the object of which is balancing our dancer is something which is called window. Okay. Look at another photograph, another interesting photograph. Now the photo above is a perfect example of how balance can be achieved even with the two subjects of different size. छोटा सा मछली है पीछे बैकग्राउंड के अंदर, या कुछ एक्वेरियम टाइप की कुछ जगह के बाहर खड़ा हुआ है ये. The man's position, rather it's a boy basically, the man's position in the bottom left of the frame is perfectly counterbalanced by the smaller sea creature in the top right corner. Removing either of the subject would make the photo feel unbalanced. For instance, if the sea creature was not present, the image might feel visually bottom heavy with the man looking at an empty space above. So this negative space which is above is being filled with this creature, which is maybe a fish or something else, and then it is being balanced over. So this is an asymmetrical balance which is very often we compose. अब ऐसा नहीं है कि इस फोटो, इस आदमी का फोटो खींचने के लिए उस मछली को पकड़ के लाया वहां पे उसने रख दिया. It was there. It was there. He just waited for that moment to come over there and click the photograph. Again, what is the theme of this photograph? Cycle, not the window. Again, but take the image of the window and bike above. Not only the subject placed off center towards the right, towards the left and right edges of the frame, they complement each other by varying in size, therefore have a balance in both size and subject placement. Cycle ka size or uska size, that is the rectangular shape. This is circular as well as triangular. It's very graphic and geometric. एक अभी film release होने वाली है. अभी मैंने कहीं पढ़ा था, My Cycle Days. ऐसे कुछ feature film है that I come to know. So maybe I'm very interested in anything to do with cycle, because it's a very common man's object. And there's a famous film called Bicycle Thief. Prakash Jha also produced a film, Mattu Ki Cycle, but not that brilliant a film. Nothing can compete with the cycle, Bicycle Thief. But again, let me see the film and figure it out. There are some stories of the cycle here and there I have very often encountered. But anyway, somebody has also written a novel which I have not read on the cycle. So look at this image in the landscape photo, not below but above. ये कहीं से ऊपर से मैंने काटा था इसलिए यहाँ पर आ गया ये. The horizon and the setting sun sits along the lines observed by the rule of the third. The brighter area of the sky and water are balanced by the darker area of the stones in the foreground. Each side of the frame balanced the opposite side. So brightness versus darkness, water versus sand. So this is the way balance is being achieved. Again, there is some example of a different kind, rule of third. Again, This kind of balloon I was talking about when I was mentioning again before, that film Burnt by the Sun, which is a very, very important film to my mind. It has a very interesting dialogue, which takes time to understand. In the photo on the left, the different, the differently sized objects, bigger silhouette bike and smaller hot air balloon. Actually ऐसा होता नहीं है, ये balloon जो होते हैं बड़े होते हैं, यहाँ पे छोटे-छोटे लिख रहे हैं तुम लोगों को. And the contrasting tone between the upper and bottom part of the frame creates asymmetrical balance within the composition. Delhi के अंदर there's a place over there called Safdarjung area, where there's a competition in the month of December or January about this hot air balloon. Many years back, I went early morning over there at 7 o'clock to shoot these balloons. And one of the photographs was published in the Children magazine. And the editor asked me, why did I choose this photograph? So there was a very interesting position on which one small balloon was riding on the another balloon, because another balloon was in front and back small balloon was a very large distance. It looked like as if it is a piggy riding over a big balloon, but that was not the case. It is just a matter of perspective that it came at a position and I shot that. So the balloon business is very interesting. If somebody is really keen, in next year, December, January, figure it out the date. It was also printed in the Nabara Times section in a color. So again, color balance. So now you can look at it, how heavy this red color look like. Why I have specifically chosen this color? Because it gives you an idea of heaviness. If this red, instead of red color, had there been some other color, for example, then it would not look that heavy. But I have specifically chosen this color so that you can get this feeling of heaviness. So I'll quickly come over there about this color business. Please listen to it carefully because it is going to be a little tricky and you need to remember many things. Otherwise, you will not understand this color balance business. There is theory of color balance also. I will not be going deep into it, but I'll be touching it on the surface from the examination point of view to understand it better. So color balance is a form of asymmetrical balance. Color balance is a form of asymmetry. Asymmetrical balance हर जगह आ रहा है. पहले भी आया, 3-4 जगह हम लोगों ने discuss किया. That's why I said the most important part of a asymmetrical balance is basically there, which you need to achieve either through color or through some other mechanism. So color balance is a form of asymmetrical balance that contrasts bright, vibrant color with more neutral colors. पहला point ये हो गया. Second point here is, which I am saying in a different sense, bright colors have more visual weight than the pastel or muted tones, and too much of one or the other can make the image feel unbalanced. You can still achieve color balance by juxtaposing a small splash of bold color against a large neutral empty space or vice versa. जैसे हमने वो लड़की और दो small boat का example दिया था. It was a splash of color against a neutral or pastel colors. So color balance. Now again, talking about the color and saturation, bold, bright colors stand out more than the subtle and neutral shades. A burst of contrasting color against a more monotone background provides a strong focal point in your photo. जैसे वो photograph अगर हम देखेंगे तो उसके अंदर छोटी-छोटी जो boats हैं, तो colors splashes are very small, but it gives the emphasis to the boat also. Now look at this image. It's a very interesting photograph in terms of the color. So vibrant color naturally carries more visual weight, while more neutral tones hold less, allowing us to try and find balance between the two. कलर व्हील को थोड़ा समझना जरूरी है. इसको जो नहीं समझेगा उसके पल्ले कुछ पड़ने वाला नहीं. The complementary colors are a very important part when we discuss the color scheme. जैसे फिल्मों के अंदर एक लॉरेल एंड हार्डी नाम का एक कपल है कॉमेडी फिल्मों के अंदर, किसी जमाने में बच्चे जब उसको देखते थे बड़ा हंसते थे, मैं भी हंसता था। अब जब भी वो, बिकॉज वन इज अ फैट अनदर इज अ थिन, so they are complementary in terms of the shape. Here we are talking about the complementary in terms of color. So what complements? So it's opposite. So if we look at here, red color is opposite of green. I take out the red slice here and you can see the red is opposite the green. So bold colors can feel overwhelming and mixing in more neutral shades can even out an image. Alternatively, you might use color that are opposite side of the color wheel to give the balance. तो अगर आप red इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं तो उसको बैलेंस करने के लिए आप green इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं. तो shade of red भी है उसके अंदर, shade of green भी है. Have a look at the color wheel. So color wheel, opposite color is an example how to use it. Now, for example, if you go have a look at the color wheel and pick a random color. Now look at the opposite color side, opposite side of the circle and see which color is lies there. The pair of colors that you just discovered is called complementary harmony. This is the example. Red के against में green है, अब वहां पे अभी आप देख चुके हैं. Blue के against में जो है यहाँ पर yellow है, यहाँ पर sorry orange है. Exactly orange है या हाँ. This is the blue. This ये blue है, ये जो है जामनी color है. So that's a different one. And then yellow is against the purple. So purple is also color of our craft poster over there outside. If you look at it carefully, we also use this color. So this is a very bright and very different kind of a color. Because the logo also have the yellow, so against yellow it stands out better. So these are the complementary colors. You need to remember this, otherwise it will be a difficult. Complementary colors have a quite an intense relationship and they tend to literally boost each other, which creates a strong color contrast. Such intense color combination can draw all the viewers' attention and thus overpower your photograph completely. So how to soften the effect of complementary color? That's a question. Now the answer lies over here. The first one is to soften one of the colors, or it could be both of them. This can be achieved by creating a new tint out of your base color, or in the other words, by simply adding white, means pastel. If you go for adding gray in your base color instead of white, what you will get is also a new tone. And you also have the alternative or adding black, in which case you get a new shade, darker shade basically, because black will give you a little more of a darker color. So you can choose whether you go by white or you can go by a darker color. Playing with freshly created tints, tones and shades can calm down the crazy color contrast and can also ensure that the colors won't steal the spotlight entirely. Second way is to take advantage of complementary color in more moderate manner, is to use one of the color as an accent and let the other dominate. This is very creative decision that can grab the viewer's attention in a subtle but gripping manner. इसके बहुत सारे कुछ फोटोग्राफ मैंने यहाँ पर चूज किए हुए हैं कलर कॉम्बिनेशन के. Now look at this. This is green versus red, but not exactly the particular red. It is a shade of red. Similarly, here it is a shade of green. Look at this also. Again, green versus red, but not that pure red, but it is more of a blood red color, which is a darker shade. So darker shade of the green and darker shade of the red. Again, the similar thing, green, darker, lighter, and maroon color, which is basically blood red. So this is a combination. Then we talk about the blue and orange. So you see a shade of blue and you see a shade of orange. Similarly, here you see a shade of blue and shade of orange. Look at very prominently blue and a darker shade of orange. with the rest of the color, which is a black. Again, a shade of blue and orange. Again, not exactly blue, but more or less from the same family, and orange. Now there's another yellow and purple. So against a purple background, you see this yellow fish. And again, a shade of purple, you see this yellow color text. So these are few examples of the color harmony which we were talking about so far. These are the things which you need to remember. Now, this is a very interesting photograph which I found over here. It's a combination of basically pastel colors. So look at these beads. These are of mainly the pastel color, except the one prominent color which is blue, dark blue. Rest of them are basically pastel. So in the rainbow colored bead would have been too heavy on the eyes if it were placed on a colored surface instead of a plain. White surface, too much color can create an unbalanced composition. Both images below were placed off, not below, but here I have just taken the text and hence were placed off center and are not balanced out by a second subject. Rather, they have balanced by using more neutral and less striking color around them. If you look at carefully in this particular photograph, every color is a kind of distinguished from the second, but they fall in the same category of pastel except the blue color. And blue was also a kind of a pastel, not a pastel, but a darker shade of a blue, so that this will become distinguished from the rest, but it doesn't look odd. Why? Because it is after the blue. So had it been just, if you shift this blue to somewhere else, then it might look, see, yellow, the lemon yellow is with a green yellow. Then there is a green, then there is a neutral white, then there is a blue, and then there is a darker blue. So from orange, pink, orange, yellow, so it is in a harmony also. There's a certain kind of harmony, there's a diagonal arrangement, all these things which we have been discussing so far. So these are the new addition which I have done to this current PPT. Now there are two more images, then we'll move to the old PPT, which many of you would have already seen or gone through it. Too much color can create an unbalanced composition. The above image were placed off center and are not balanced out by a second subject. On the contrary, here you see a folk. Rather, they have balanced by using more neutral and less striking colors around them. So it is a kind of whitish color, or you can say gray color. Gray is a background, and this folk is shiny color. So it is a little bit of a contrast from what the subject is. So not exactly the subject, food and other material, whatever it is, but on the contrary, something which is complementing to it. खाने के लिए फोक की जरूरत पड़ेगी. अगर यह चम्मच रख देते तो then it would be little odd, because there is nothing which you will eat with the spoon. It is a fork which is required here. Sometimes you have to be careful. A very interesting image, this one. Here you see this red apple, and again the background is also red. But even though this is a very dark image with a lot of blacks, the rich, intense color of the cherries is not lost in the background. The color, quantity and placement balance out against the black shadow. It is not an apple, but it's a cherry. It looks like an apple at long distance at first when you look at it, but it's cherry basically. And this long thing is also specify that. So these are the images which I have added. Now we'll go with the photograph which I have yesterday. I also shown you similar kind of photograph, and I also told you that one character placed in the center of these horns. So you can see that rhythm also in the photograph, but at the same time is also a balance. So again, as I said, that the human versus animal in this photograph, human versus animal. So I'll read out the text. A visual balance is not necessarily a repetition of element in a composition. There are two diagonal lines in the composition formed by the horns of the bull. The opposite S curves of the horn and the central human element figure brings in a sense of balance in the picture. balance is also achieved by placing the lines of the horizon at 1/3 of the composition. जो हमने बात की अभी 1/3 rule की. 2/3 of the area on the top is a bright sky and 1/3 of the area at the bottom is heavier because of the visual element. So the gravity is towards the bottom, which gives a sense of stability to the picture. Stability का मतलब क्या है? ये उड़ नहीं रहा है, हवा में नहीं लटका हुआ है फोटोग्राफ. फोटोग्राफ जो है हवा में नहीं लटका हुआ है. There is a balance because the face is providing the base. Face is providing a base in this particular photograph. Now look at this again. A boat where there's a graffiti and this eye is also marked over on the top, and you see this lady. It looked like as if it is a hooked on the lady's head. If you remove the lady, so lady is also giving a kind of a balance to this curvilinear structure. So principle of balance can be observed through the concept of weighing balance. Elements are placed on either side of the image to create a certain weight. Usually such elements are of varying shapes and size. In this case, the woman is balancing the large boat. ऐसा लग रहा है कि इसके ऊपर टांग दी गई है. This is a very unusual kind of a photograph where people are trying to practice this. And you see here in the backside, people are taking a bath, and then sand versus these legs position again. This is an example of where the tightrope walker uses, here the legs are being used for balancing the body. So balancing act of the child in the picture brings a new perspective to the concept of balance. There is nothing unusual if one observes a person balancing on his legs. But the act of balancing on one's hand is unique. This leaves the viewer to question the state of equilibrium, thus inviting interest to the picture. ऐसा लगता है कि गिर जाएगा कभी भी, but वो गिरता नहीं है, वो एक अलग बात है. Because there is a water ripples की बात की थी हम लोगों ने थोड़ी देर पहले. There is an image for the same. In this image, balance is perceived if one observes the large and a brighter area in the upper part of the photograph with the smaller and bright area in the lower part. Apart from creating a sense of rhythm, the central alignment of the dark figure creates a balance with the dark tone of the water. ये जब आप practice करेंगे तो then it becomes a routine for you. Now you see here the sunrise or sunset, nobody can say, probably sunset, and then the picture of the bell. So position of the sun is very interesting in this one. So in this image, one big bell and the two small bells create a sense of balance. The balance is further enhanced by the smaller area covered by the dark bell on one side of the image, leaving a large, lighter space on the diagonally opposite side. The sun seen through the bell becomes the focal point of interest. You see this little boy with the, so shadow is kite and his jerky in the hand. So when the element in a composition are placed in such a way that the visual weight of each element balances the other, it is referred to as asymmetrical balance. In this case, the child and his shadow are balanced by the kite. The dark shadow forms a contrast which catches the viewer attention. This is a simple photograph of these two parrots. As I was just mentioning, piggy riding over the others. Here it is the other one, छोटे के ऊपर बड़ा बैठा हुआ. There, the big balloon was in the foreground and small balloon was piggy riding over the big one. So it was opposite of what just I said. The birds are positioned in a diagonal line as they are perched in a crisscross manner. Since opposing forces usually create an equilibrium, balance is perceived due to this visual movement. The visual weight of the picture is at the center, which further enhances the balance. Hanji. This is one of the interesting photographs you can see here. The pole in this image divides it into the two unequal parts. The positioning of the bird against the pole is balanced with a patch of thick cloud on the top left corner, which subdues the bird of the sky while imparting an overall visual balance to the image. So how the cloud is acting as a balancing factor into this photograph. Look at this cloud, which if it is not there, then it might not look that interesting the way it is looking now. Now, this is a very dynamic photograph in terms of the lines which we were talking about earlier, how the lines can lead to a balance. Here you can see that the two opposing forces of the lines of the building and the direction of the runner creates a sense of balance. Again, this little girl is holding a pistol. So you can see this diagonal lines. जैसे हमने पहले बोला कि lines का क्या लेन देना है. Here you can see how these lines are creating a balance. So the lines of the staircase represent a diagonal relationship with the main figure, the girl. All the lines end at her and her hand form a triangle, which further brings attention to the gun, the focal point of the image. Now you look at this photograph. So big circle, small circle, and then there is an ellipse, which is the intersection of the two circles. And then the background, you can see the cloud and all these kind of a thing. So in this image, a dark background is placed against a bright background, thus creating a sense of balance. The strength of the visual element is an important aspect in the balance. Here, the large forms are closed and seem stronger than the smaller ones, which are open and rectangular. So, जैसे मैंने पहले बताया था आपको, anything which is closer to the camera would look larger, whether it is a shape or a mass or a circle or rectangle. Here it is a circular image, window, which is basically. Again, Holi is tomorrow, I suppose. So this photograph, you can look at this curve of this vessel and the red versus blue. So this cross kind of a thing, which is elliptical part of the sign. In this image, the bright red color overs almost 2/3 of the image, while the deep blue constitute the rest. The relative intensity of the color, when placed in a complementary proportion, creates a sense of balance. Also, the border of the plate creates a forceful line formation, which makes the image more communicative. So these are the images and text. So in the previous 5 days crash course lecture, if you look at it, you will not find these 80 images and text of the explanation, which is added in the subject. This also need to be refined more, but then it takes time always. So this is in between. If anybody has a question, you can ask. 30 more minutes are there. I'll read out 2 more PPTs and I'll stop this one. जी उसमें जो डोमिनेटिंग कैरेक्टर था वो तो पिजन था, मतलब वो क्लाउड पे तो वो ध्यान डोमिनेटिंग तो वो है भाई. फोटोग्राफ अगर फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज यू हैव टू आस्क ये फोटोग्राफ किस चीज का है, तो तुम बोलोगे क्लाउड का फोटोग्राफ, not a cloud photograph. No? So that is a complementary. It's a complementing to the subject. So to balance the flight, which is otherwise, I'll just show you again this picture. Just wait. Let me just show the picture. So here, if you see carefully, then this line, which is a little diagonal line, it is acting as a support for it. This line is acting as a support. अगर ये नहीं होता मान लीजिए यहाँ पे लाइन, तो ऐसा इसको सपोर्ट इमीडिएटली जो इमीडिएट सपोर्ट, अब मान लीजिए मैं यूं ऐसे बैठा हूं तो मेरे लिए इमीडिएट सपोर्ट क्या है, ये चेयर. बट अगर ये चेयर नहीं है तो क्या मैं नहीं बैठ सकता? I can still sit. So bird can still fly, right? So this vertical is giving a immediate support to the image, not in terms of physical support, which I just mentioned, but and then this otherwise negative space. अगर ये cloud यहाँ नहीं है तो ये negative space. इस negative space में cloud की वजह से the presence is being filled with the cloud. अगर ये cloud नहीं है, then it is a negative space. Similarly, below also छोटा सा cloud नीचे भी है bottom पे, right? So this is a negative space which is being filled up by this cloud, which is the big one, as well as a small cloud, which is the bottom one. I'll just stop this thing and then I'll share the another PPT. हाँ जी. Quickly, we will talk about another element which we also had discussed today, which is called symmetry, but little more prominently. Okay, guys. So symmetry, we also discussed today the asymmetrical concept, and vertical and horizontal symmetry. We also mentioned about that. So these are some of the images. These two matkas are placed next to each other, but if you look at it, it is not in the absolute center. It is not in the absolute center. In the background, these pastel colors, one is almost matching with the color of the matka, and then this pastel green, almost like a faded one. So symmetry is very similar to balance. When balance emerges on a vertical axis, we call it as a symmetrical balance. In this picture, we draw an imaginary line between the two pots. A sense of equality is perceived, though there is an absence of geometrical precision. Our knowledge of the pots as a symmetrical object also contribute to the perception of symmetry. हमें पता है दोनों मटके एक जैसे, right? So even if they are placed off center, it still call it as a symmetrical. Now look at this photograph. If you remove this man and the left side and the absolute right side, it is a 100% vertical symmetry, right? You can cut from the center and it become a vertical symmetry. But these two elements add the interest to the entire photograph when somebody is cleaning and other side is not absolutely 100% symmetrical. And these birds on the top also add the value to this otherwise blank space. So according to the principle of symmetry, both sides are similar in a visual weight. As symmetrical balance often looks stiff and formal, it is also called a formal balance, जो हमने पहले discuss किया है. Now look at these position of these two goats. So this is a case of implied symmetry. If the picture is dissected, there is no geometrical symmetry. It is a conceptual. The posture of the goats, the way they are looking at the camera, and the similarity in their color contribute to give a feeling of visual symmetry. Again, this is absolutely symmetrical photograph. Again, this is more or less, you can see, you can cut from the center and both of them look vertical symmetry. I'm not reading out the text so that you can get the feel more clearly. Anywhere where you, now this photograph you will find, except these two people, even the two people, the posture, their body language, the gamcha they are carrying, more or less they look same. And then there's two little kids on the right side. So as I said, they're not necessarily to be 100%, but I would say if just remove these two people from here, or if you calculate the percentage area, this is just contributing 5% of the entire area. 95% of the area is symmetrical in terms of the object and other thing. So in Islamic architecture, geometrical symmetry with the orderly and equal opposite is the most common element. Here the symmetry of the buildings, arches is well captured through the angle of the shot. The people break the monotony of the composition. ये बहुत अच्छा sentence है. The people breaks the monotony of the composition. कुछ ऐसे सेंटेंस याद रहने चाहिए क्योंकि ये फोटोग्राफ में कहीं ना कहीं आपको दिखाई देगा. So as I said yesterday also, कोई पूछ रहा था कि what is the, क्या था वो trick, what is the tips? Tips यही है कि these kind of sentences you should be ready in your mind and there you should be able to reproduce only. Again, a simple pole of electric which you can see on the fields but taken from the bottom. एकदम नीचे घुस के उसने फोटोग्राफ जो है लिया है, so that it gives an interesting angle. Recently I have seen when I was going to Gurgaon that all these electrical poles which used to be very simple earlier now have become very high tech. There is a steps over there, you can climb up to that. So that replacement has come, I don't know when, but in a couple of months. So an electricity tower shot from below illustrates symmetry in this composition. Visual is the same from the any axis, including the vertical. It can be seen as a pattern. Pattern भी बोल सकते हैं इसको. There is a pattern also in this one. और ये graphic image भी है. जब हमने पहले बात की थी, lines हैं इसके अंदर, rectangles हैं, triangles हैं, curvilinear lines हैं. All these things you should be able to explain while writing an answer. So I'll stop this and then I'll quickly show you another slide. Harmony. एक last का ये रह गया है, harmony. All these words look similar, but they have a little different meaning. So don't get confused. Okay. हाँ जी. Here you go. थोड़ा बड़ा कर लेते हैं इसको. Okay, guys. So we should be able to finish. We still have a time enough. Harmony. Look at this kind of installation. There's a term called installation, where basically it is more connected with the fine arts rather than you people, but you should know some idea what exactly it is all about. So somebody has used these paper cups and dig the holes over there and put them over there. So somebody has taken a photograph. So you can see a repetition of something. When we talk about the harmony, this is a repetition of the same object again and again into the similar pattern. So there's a pattern also over there and there's a harmony also. Harmony in the sense that they are more or less, not more or less, they're exactly the same object repeated again and again. So the text is, when no one element dominates in a composition, there is nothing you can say that this cup is more important than any other cup. All cups are same. Maybe the cups in the front are very clear, second row, third row, all the cups are clear. So when no one element dominates a composition, harmony as a principle is evident. ये बहुत अच्छा statement है, याद रखना है, जिन लोगों को लिखना पड़ेगा वहां पर. In this picture of an installation of thermocol cups, the arrangement is rather random. The spacing is varied, but overall there is a unity. There are only two kinds of element in the image. One is a circular and other is background. The randomness of the cups does not create a pattern. When one looks at the image, the eye is not drawn to one particular place. The color contrast and the simplicity of the element works as an invitation to view the image again and again. So this is the text which these kind of photographs required. एक चीज सब लोग ध्यान रखना, it is not number of words आप लिखते हैं वहां पे, कितना लंबा चौड़ा लिख के आ रहे हो उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. कोई भी गधा जो है कुछ भी लिख के आ जाएगा, उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. What you write is how profound it is, that is more important. Profoundness and points, how many points you have and how many minimum words you use to describe something is important. So यहाँ पर जो है all kind of gods are here. So this is basically a very chaotic image to my mind, and no principle as such applies over here except the similar object which are here. So let's see what description says. So in this image, the eye is drawn to the sculpture quality of each individual element. Each sculpture has a separate look and a feel when examined in detail, but overall the style and the treatment of each sculpture follows the same language. The random arrangement avoids the formation of any particular pattern. There is a unity because of the arrangement, visual element, and the style in which each sculpture is painted. There is also a mixture of all colors in approximately equal proportion. Further, the tungsten light creates a yellow cast which enhances the harmony by creating a warm. तो हार्मनी कहाँ है यहाँ पर? बेसिकली सिमिलर काइंड ऑफ गॉड. ऐसा नहीं है कि इसके अंदर बीच में जो है कोई जीसस क्राइस्ट का फोटो रख दिया. ध्यान से देखो, they all are Hindu gods, and that's why there is a some kind of similarity and harmony, because more or less they belong to the same genre. This is again an image very interestingly shot in terms of the composition, but again you look at the graphic part of it as well as the harmony, how the harmony is being created. There is equilibrium in the composition as the visual energy is equally distributed. The overall blue color creates harmony, and the relative size of each element help in perceiving the balance. The space dedicated for each element is also more or less equal. तीनों जो है कोई ऐसा बड़ा नहीं है, छोटा नहीं है. So when we talk about this word harmony, you should be able to figure it out. What is the element which you are going to discuss? बहुत अच्छा फोटोग्राफ नहीं है, इसको छोड़ते हैं. This is an interesting photograph जो कल हमने बात की थी आपसे. मुहर्रम के टाइम में ऐसा जो है आपको सीन आसानी से मिल जाएगा. वहां हैंड्स पोजीशन को लेके था. Here it is hitting by belt or some other kind of thing to their own body, and you can see this red blood coming from there. So this is very symbolic in terms of the gesture, why people do that. So each person in the picture is involved in the same activity but has a different posture. The uniformity of activity and the continuous randomness in the placement of the elements create overall harmony. ये word है overall harmony. ये describe करना बड़ा important है. तुमको तो समझ आ गया, और तुमको क्या समझ आया वो एग्जामिनर को भी समझ आना चाहिए. उसके लिए लैंग्वेज के ऊपर कमांड जो है बहुत जरूरी है. What kind of word you choose to describe, that is the whole intention of this class. Now this kind of tree become very colorful, and you can see in today's time when you go out you will find this flower blooming outside. Very often you will see. So this is a tree. Again, this is an example of contrast creating harmony. Through the color, red and green are contrasty in nature. In this case, their even distribution create harmony. The irregular pattern of the dark tree trunk and branches also distributed uniformly, which further accentuate harmony. अभी एक किताब है, किताबों की दुकान है, बहुत सारे. Again, the similar kind of a thing. It is the Indian god and goddesses, and these photograph, what we discussed earlier. You can see this image. This is an example of unity in diversity. Although all photographs are different in size, or they appear to be because of the arrangement, each photograph depicts a god or goddess. They are also painted in a similar fashion. Hence, the overall effect of all the elements create a harmony. This is a different kind of image. So at sunset, all the other color appears to be camouflaged by the black, but the warm analogous color, red, yellow, and orange, creates a sense of harmony. These are the three colors which are prominent over there in the image. This is a very interesting photograph. You look at it. And again, as I said earlier also, what kind of objects are there? What kind of objects are in the foreground and the background, and the colorful hanging of the clothes from the top. So at night, all the other colors are hidden by black. ये कुछ और आ गया है यहाँ पर, उसका नहीं है ये इस वाले का पढ़ रहे हैं. Sorry, we are supposed to read this one. So harmony is created due to the presence of different color. Opposite colors in this image create a sense of contrast, which upon repetition leads to a color harmony. जरूरी नहीं है एक ही कलर हो, उसमें बार बार जो है रिपीटिशन भी है कलर्स का. This is again another simple image. It is more interesting because you could see how much the space is being given from the top, bottom, and these guys who are carrying this boat. So in this picture, three different elements are captured: earth, sky, and water. Harmony is achieved because of the complementary colors, green, blue, and white. The horizon creates an uneven line, and when this is seen together with the lines created by clouds and waves, it announces the harmony. The two human figures carrying a surfboard not only create a point of interest but also break the monotony. Otherwise, कुछ फोकस नहीं है इसके अंदर जिसके ऊपर आप देखना चाहें. अगर इन दो लोगों को निकाल दो यहाँ से, तो अगर पूछा जाए कि फोटोग्राफ किस चीज का है, so you would say it is just a seashore, right? Now it's a very simple photograph. Background is blurred as we had discussed earlier. Text is interesting to read. In this image, the out of focus effect, shallow depth of field, blurs and thus mixes all the colors in the background. So the background appears to be harmonious. The whiteness of the bird and the tones of other color creates an overall harmony. ऐसा नहीं है कि नीला पीला हरा गुलाबी जो है white के against जो है दिखाई दे रहा है. Again, very bright fluorescent colors, and you can see these are the plastic charkhi In our time, this kind of thing were not there. They were more of made of wooden material. But it's an interesting photograph in terms of bright colors. So this is a classic example of harmony created amidst chaos, multiple colors, no specific order, no particular domination. And the hello. Okay. So no particular domination, and the uniform shape of the spindles create this unique harmony. So this is in brief. 10 minutes we can discuss if you have any doubt. So today is going to be the last class, except one MCQ class, which I'll take in any of these days, maybe tomorrow, maybe day after tomorrow, depends. Hanji. So you can ask anything if you want to ask. If you don't want to ask, don't ask. Hanji. बहुत सारे लोग जो है, some of the people I can recognize, some people looks a little different, but it's fine. So the tip is basically write in the point form, point 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever is the question. Always there are 3 points you want to talk about, 4 points you want to talk about. Second is use minimum number of words to describe that point. You will not get the more marks in the descriptive paper if you use too many words to say something. Be laconic. There's a word in English language called laconic. So to the point, be brief. अगर आपसे पूछा जाए कि क्या टाइम हुआ है तो आप सीधा सीधा बताएंगे 2:10 हो गए या 12:50 हो गए 12:50 PM. वहां ये लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है कि अरे it's a high time to buy a watch and then you look at your rate and then you find out what exactly is the time. अगर आपसे टाइम पूछा जा रहा है तो आप सीधा सीधा टाइम बताएं. And talk about the most important thing about somebody. Past में write a short note on Subroto Mitra. तो ये बकवास करने की जरूरत नहीं है कि सुब्रतो मित्रा वाज नॉट मैरिड, ही वाज अ सिंगल. इससे क्या लेना देना? कुछ लोग ये फालतू की बकवास करते हैं वहां पर बैठ के. कोई आपसे ऑटोबायोग्राफी नहीं पूछी जा रही है उसकी, आपसे उसका प्रोफाइल नहीं पूछा जा रहा है, आपसे पूछा जा रहा है कि राइट ए शॉर्ट नोट ऑन सुब्रतो मित्रा. सो व्हाट इज सो ग्रेट अबाउट सुब्रतो मित्रा? यू मेंशन अबाउट दैट. व्हाट इज सो ग्रेट अबाउट अशोक मेहता? कुछ लोग सिनेमेटोग्राफी के बैठे हुए हैं यहाँ पर, पूछ ही लेता हूं मैं लगे आता हूं. बताइए, व्हाई अशोक मेहता इज अ ग्रेट सिनेमेटोग्राफर? डायरेक्शन के लोगों को ही पता होना चाहिए. ऐसी बात नहीं है कि डायरेक्टर बनने जा रहे हैं हम तो हमको क्या लेन देना, हमको तो सिनेमेटोग्राफर थोड़ी बनना है. पता तो होना चाहिए. हिंदुस्तान का हाईएस्ट पेड सिनेमेटोग्राफर फॉर विच पीपल यूज्ड टू वेट फॉर हिज डेट्स, आई हैव सीन फ्रॉम माय ओन आईज. आई वर्क विद मेहता जी फॉर 3 months. I have only written one article in my life in past 9 years. My experience of working with Ashok Mehta, why he was a great cinematographer. कौन बताएगा यहाँ पे? कोई आदमी बताएगा? कुछ लोग तो सिनेमेटोग्राफी के हैं इस क्लास के अंदर, और डायरेक्शन के लोगों को ही पता होना चाहिए. भाई डायरेक्शन के लोगों को ही पता होना चाहिए. छोले भटूरे वालों के साथ थोड़ी काम करोगे तुम लोग. यू विल वर्क विद द सिनेमेटोग्राफर. हु विल शूट योर फिल्म? सिनेमेटोग्राफर. तो वहां ये पूछा जाएगा कि राइट ए शॉर्ट नोट ऑन अशोक मेहता, तो तुम वहां लिखोगे अशोक मेहता जी अंडे बेचते थे शुरू में, पहले उससे कोई लेना देना नहीं है. अंडे बेचते थे या छोले भटूरे बेचते थे, उस चीज से कोई मतलब नहीं. यू हैव टू टॉक अबाउट व्हाई समबडी इज अ ग्रेट इन अ पॉइंट 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. और वो जो जेनरिक चीजें हैं वो हर एक के पास होती है. ही हैज अ वेरी गुड सेंस ऑफ कंपोजिशन. वो हर सिनेमेटोग्राफर के पास होता है. 200 सिनेमेटोग्राफर जो 1 लाख रुपए चार्ज करते हैं, एवरीबडी हैज अ गुड सेंस ऑफ कंपोजिशन, एवरीबडी हैज अ गुड सेंस ऑफ लाइटिंग. दिस आर जेनरिक थिंग. गुड सेंस ऑफ लाइटिंग, गुड कंपोजिशन, these are generic. So you will not get a good marks because of these. You will pinpoint point 1, 2, 3, 4. Only then you get good marks. So your answer has to be distinguished from other people. तो रात को सोने से पहले सोचना कि why Ashok Mehta is the great cinematographer of this country. The greatest cinematographer of this country is Ashok Mehta. And then Subroto Mitra. And then K.K. Mahajan. And then rest. This is the order. Bengalis might say Subroto Mitra is a great, because they always believe that the greatest people are born in West Bengal only. So their opinion might different, but all over the world, people believe that Ashok Mehta is the greatest cinematographer of this country, and then Subroto Mitra, and then K.K. Mahajan, and then rest. This is all. So thank you very much. Still have a question? You can ask me quickly, irrespective of the fact whether it belongs to direction or cinematography. Remember, it is you who has to write the examination. I wrote the examination 26 years back, and I topped the written entrance exam, and there was no Naresh Sharma to teach me. I still have that list. If you work hard, you will qualify. If you don't work hard, you will not qualify. It might look a little disheartening, but that is the fact.
Excuse me, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, sir. I was just asking, when is the exam? Is it decided or not?
It is the greatest question anyone can ask who is preparing for FTI entrance exam. Last date is over. Last date of filling up the application form is over. That was 4th of March. So
Okay.
I suppose you are preparing for next year. That's why you're not bothered, right?
Yes.
I know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Never mind. But remember next year, when is the last date? Otherwise, you will miss the boat. What is your name?
Vimal.
What's your full name?
Vimal B. Shankar.
Vimal B. Shankar. Okay. Anybody else who has equally brilliant question? Everybody is encyclopedia. Everything is clear. I wish you all the best. Don't play Holi tomorrow. Get into your computer, open your laptop and study. Otherwise, you will keep playing Holi till next year. Good luck.